Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is better buying power. A friend of mine came by my office a couple weeks ago, and it's always interesting to talk to friends of mine who are really savvy in the industry and what they see versus what I see and we all see in my job. And he said something to me like, well, should cost has kind of gone away, hasn't it? And I kind of was stunned when I heard that. I said, no, should cost has been one of the foundational better buying power principles since 1.0. I thought maybe we're not talking about our successes. So let me tell you once again what should cost is. If we have a program, all programs must have an independent cost estimate. That is by law, usually done either by CAPE or AFCA or both. Okay? Then, if it's a real program, us in the Air Force, the programmers, have to fund it. They have to put the money in, and it has to be funded to those independent cost estimates. Again, that's required. What should cost does is once that's in the budget, then the industry and the program office go and attack those costs and try to beat them. And when they're validated and achieved, the money that was in the budget is available then to be taken back, and we have a set of governance rules, and they can be put back into the portfolio and or turned back to the Air Force corporate line. So let me give a couple of examples. I have like 5 examples. I'm only going to show 3. Slide. So next slide. This is one that was done by Major General Scott Jansen, who's here, right here, down in PEO Weapons. What Scott and his team did was they did a series of best practices across various programs, increasing competition, data-driven negotiations. What data-driven negotiations means is using actuals, doing larger buys. What you see, what they found on the right was, first of all, they got about 350 they were able to turn back to corporate Air Force. And then they were able to buy back a bunch of weapons. Look at the weapons that Scott and his team were able to buy back. The AMRAAMs, those are the QF-16s are the targets. This is just an example of what we're talking. This is real money that was returned back both to the Air Force and to the warfighter in terms of capabilities. Slide. Here's space. I mentioned to you earlier the work that was done by General Polakowski and Lockheed Space on SBIRS. They've done incredible work over the last 5 or 6 years. Look at the numbers there, $6 billion plus in savings. Now again, a lot of this was because the cost estimates, the independent cost estimates were done based upon history when things were quite expensive in space. So in some ways you could argue we had a low bar to get under to beat these cost estimates. But remember, we have to fund to those cost estimates. So this is real money. And you can see the type of things that they did. Increased competition, efficiency. That efficiency is the matchmaker I was describing on SBIRS. And then streamlining deliverables, that's also the SBIRS example. And look what we did. They were able to return $6 billion to the Air Force. And we've got a potential of $800 million more that we may achieve here. Slide. Here's battle management. This is Steve Wirt up at Hanscom. Steve has got about $467 million already, and he's tracking about the same amount of potential in the same time period. And again, look what he did. Increased competition. Look what's right there. Cost capability analysis. He used cost capability analysis, and he was able to put the money back into many of these programs. So it's this hard work that's going on that's kind of not being noticed that is buying back weapons and mitigating the really tough budget situation we're in. My estimate, and I wanted to have it for this talk, but I don't, is we've saved about $2 billion in real money over about this 5 to 6 year period that we've pumped back into the Air Force. Now, you have to think about this for a second and say, probably as we continue these best practices, we're probably not going to continue to get these savings, right? Because the next time the independent cost estimates will be done, they're going to use these best practices, right? And we're driving these best practices into the culture so that this is the expectation. But for now, because the independent cost estimates are using a time frame before we were doing all this, we're reaping a lot of value out of this. So I wanted to show that to people just so they understand the success that's going on. And this is just one aspect of better buying power.
He's asking if we should be putting our goals into the budget exhibits. I think you're referring partly to should cost goals. We don't do that. We don't do it for a very good reason. The idea, should cost are targets. They're aspirational. And what everybody's been concerned about ever since we started doing that was that as soon as you write down your should cost, the comptroller or the Congress or somebody will take the money. They'll assume you got the savings. Just because you have an idea of how you might get some savings doesn't mean you will get them. We don't hold our people to the standard of you must achieve your should cost. You must stay within your budget between the what we call the will cost, what for the major programs, that's the independent cost estimate level usually. And the should cost is a target. It's a management goal that we're setting. So we do, I think, sometimes talk about our successes where people have achieved it because we want people to get credit for what they've done. We don't let people realize their savings until they actually get them. First example of this was on the F-35 when Dr. Carter was still in the undersecretary position. We achieved a lower price on a fixed price contract. It was our first fixed priced lot of F-35. Then then the ICE had predicted, and we had budgeted to the ICE. So Ash was able to call the services and say, okay, we got the better price. It's locked in, it's under contract, it's a fixed price contract. I'm going to let you reduce your budget to come down to the level that we achieved and take that money and use it for something else. And we're going to assume the same learning curve. We're going to assume we're on a reasonable learning curve here. So you get a tail from that. You get some money in the out years to take as well. So there's a real downside to putting these out in public and putting them out to Congress. Now, if I could get the comptrollers of the world in the service and in DOD and people on the Hill to not take the money once I put the number on the table, then we'd be willing to do it. But that's not the world we're living in.